It's important during the discussion of stock transfer to remember why council housing came into effect. It started because the private sector was not capable of providing decent and affordable accommodation for the people. At the end of the war, there was cross-party agreement across all the Conservatives and Labour that the ordinary working people of this country needed decent and affordable council housing. That's where the initiative came from, and it has for many decades provided just that. Unfortunately, it's been starved of finances over the last few years.
There is a desperate need for a good national housing strategy that would actually tackle the problem seriously over the next 10 to 20 years. What we've actually got is a push by the Scottish Executive to privatise all the housing and hand it over to housing associations, which is not a housing strategy.
The rules that govern stock transfer and the way the councils operate say that councils should give fair and balanced information. It's blatantly not being observed here.
They have tried to involve tenants in many ways, but what we think is that when they're consulting, they're really wanting to persuade rather than involve.
Been bombarded every month with glossy leaflets and letters from the council telling me that stock transfer is it's the best thing for me.
The council seems to have unlimited funds, partly from the Scottish Executive, to run a massive campaign in terms of the publicity, the number of leaflets they can put out.
When all this stuff came through, and it's still coming through, I mean, I've got piles of it in the house, and it's all saying the same thing about stock transfer. But people have read all that, and they've had time to think about that, and now they're getting other information through, and they're starting to ask questions.
The taxpayer and the public are actually subbing this new organisation because they're getting the houses on the cheap.
We looked at the total sale price for all the council housing is just over 22,000 at the time of sale, and how much it's being sold for. It works out as a mere £941 per house in Edinburgh. An outrageous insult to tenants. Yet the privateers are given the single option to buy that. Tenants aren't even being allowed to offer to buy it themselves.
And we think this is something that people should be concerned about. The fact that houses are going to be sold for a few £100s.
The privatisations that you see happening in the country just now, hospitals and schools and stuff, council housing and the land that it's on and the homes that people are living in dwarfs all the other privatisations. It's here in Edinburgh, the land alone is worth billions of pounds, and it's publicly owned land that's been handed straight over to the private sector.
We think the very fact of separating off from the council means it's privatisation. We realise that the campaign to transfer the housing stock is a part of the wider move to privatise parts of the public services. It's part of the New Labour agenda.
The real benefiters from privatisation of stock transfer are the bankers and the directors of the new company.
The only grant, if you like, to the new housing association will be the debt write-off of around about £300 million. The rest of it, to make up the £2 billion that they're talking about in the package, will have to be borrowed in the private market and will be paid out of the rent that tenants will have to pay. So far from being debt-free, the new organisation will end up with a massive debt in the long term as it seeks to build new houses or renovate the existing ones.
Land values are so high that whenever builders build houses, they want to get the maximum number of housing units on that land. So what you're getting is you're getting quite small accommodation in terms of space.
I was given what looked initially to be a nice housing association house. But the house itself was, alright, it was modern, it was something like 5 years old, but it was basically just jerry built. Certainly wasn't bricks and mortar. The rooms were very small, The walls were made of plasterboard or gyprock, I think they call it.
One of the biggest problems that we have in relation to antisocial behaviour is noise from next door neighbours. But there is nothing in the building regulations about noise insulation.
It's easy for people moving into a new house to be really sort of overwhelmed by think this is great, you know, we've got a brand new modern house. But after a while, once they realise it's not really quite as good a house as they thought it was.
I just think there is a danger that in 20 or 30 years' time, bearing in mind that they only carry a National House Builder certification for 25 years, you could be facing in 25, 30 years' time another set of slums.
Being a council tenant is, you were looked after that way. Your rent was something you could afford to pay.
And also I think we've seen in England, especially in the areas post-transfer, that rents increase substantially.
You know, they say, oh, this is affordable, but affordable to who?
I'd be worried. For myself personally. The prospect of higher rents maybe in the next few years. Friends and family being moved out of their houses, especially the Fort, moved into new housing association properties with higher rents.
Maintenance charges, you know, you're actually going to be paying for council services, you know, grass cutting, stair cleaning, stuff like that.
So the bottom line is you've had a survey done by the council which now shows that the majority of people who've been consulted do not know what stock transfer is.
The response from the council to that was to move the ballot date forward from spring to November this year, 2005.
This whole move towards stock transfer is not tenant-led.
It's all one-sided. They're basically saying to us that, yeah, we should vote, but we should vote yes. I'd be worried about my son, I'd be worried about the next generation. I think getting rid of the safety net of council housing is not the answer to solving the British housing crisis.
I would say to any tenant who's considering at the minute what the future is, think very carefully.
The council says there isn't an alternative. We think that's wrong. We think actually, by the fact that we've talked to people and won people over in public debate, shows that tenants really are looking for an alternative. They want to remain council tenants, but they want investment too.
Essentially, if the executive relaxed the rules about borrowing, then councils could borrow from the public loans boards and from other sources and get the money it needs to improve its houses without having to transfer ownership. It's a very simple thing, it's a political thing the executive needs to do, but if tenants vote no in Edinburgh, it will add enormous pressure upon them to do just that.
It's essential to guarantee the future of council housing in Edinburgh that people vote, and they vote no.